Hi, Anna.
Hi, so great to see you today. Thank you for welcoming me.
Thank you. So, today my guest is Anna Nagurney. She's the John F. Smith Memorial Professor at the Isenberg School of Management at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, and she's also the director of the Virtual Center for Supernetworks. Anna is the author or editor of 15 books, and she also wrote about 50 book chapters. She also published more than 200 journal papers. Anna is also a member of the editorial board of a number of journals. She received many important awards throughout her career. You can find the list in her Wikipedia page. Anna was one of the 44 women in STEM featured in the STEM Gems book as a role model for young women. She has given plenary talks and tutorials on 5 continents. Anna has a beautiful, extensive, and brilliant career, and she's here to share some of her wonderful stories. So, Anna, thank you so much. It's a huge honor to have you here. How are you?
It's a big pleasure to be part of your series. I'm so honored and so looking forward to our wonderful conversation and interview today.
Thank you. So, Anna, to start, you were actually born in Canada, right?
Yes, I was born in Windsor, Ontario, which is very close to Detroit. And then when I was only about 3 years old, we moved to Toronto. So Canada has always been very close to my heart.
Right. And your parents were actually from Ukraine, correct?
Yes, Ukrainian is actually my first language. My parents were refugees from World War II. They both immigrated into Canada, and they actually met in Canada. And then ultimately we moved first to Detroit, Michigan, and then to New Jersey. And ultimately we settled in Yonkers, New York. So Ukrainian was always a very important part of my youth. I didn't learn how to speak English until I went to kindergarten, actually. So I love the language, I love the culture, and it's really a part of me.
Okay, so at a very young age, you moved from Canada to the US, and then you lived in many places until you sort of settled down in New York City or nearby, correct?
Right outside of New York City, in Yonkers, it's a suburb
Mm-hmm.
of New York City. So it's actually one of the biggest cities in New York State.
Mm, I see. I know that you were involved in many activities while growing up. Can you mention some of them?
Oh, sure. I've always loved nature. Summers we would spend in the Poconos, actually living in a bungalow. So the children will always be exploring outside, picking berries, swimming in the lakes, and so on. So nature was very important when I was growing up. Also, because we lived close to New York City, we would visit the museums, we would go to the opera, to various ballet productions. So I became in love with art. I did a lot of painting. I'm surrounded by my oil paintings now as I'm speaking to you. And I also love piano, and I was actually even considering a career as a ballerina. So I have actually many, many talents, but from the very beginning, mathematics was a true love of mine. It began actually in first grade. I had the most wonderful math teacher, and she would put us into different groups, and the children would compete with each other on math problems in the blackboard, which I thought was really wonderful. And that was very, very important to me. My father had been an engineer, my uncle had been an engineer, and they very much supported, I think, me personally, and just generally girls in STEM. And I would also like to mention my seventh grade teacher, Mrs. Fuller. She was fabulous. And she said to me, and it just stuck with me, she said, Anna, one day you'll be a calculus professor. I wasn't even sure what calculus was at that point, but it was important to me. And I think, teachers have an incredible role in mentoring and supporting students in just a few words can really make a difference in students' lives. So I feel so honored to be an academic and an educator, and hopefully I am positively impacting students. So I had a wonderful elementary school education and also fabulous, I think, high school education at Yonkers High School. Very good teachers in STEM and also languages and even literature.
Wow. Did you perform as a piano player and ballerina?
Yes, I did. I would put, actually, I had many concerts even in New York City on Fifth Avenue, very close to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Okay, and the Ukrainian Institute. I love it. But to me, music is a language, mathematics is a language, computer programming are languages. It's actually, they're all tied in together, and they all allow you to express yourself and try and be creative and to make something beautiful. And that I think is really important. And I think our field is like that too, of operations research. We try and create something of lasting value that's beautiful, I would say, and also very useful. Okay, and many can take advantage of it.
Right. You have certainly multiple abilities. How hard was for you to choose a university degree?
Actually, it was really hard. Professor Subramanian, and that's one reason I chose Brown, because Brown had a very unusual program, I guess, for those who love everything. They offered a 5-degree undergraduate program, Bachelor's of Arts and Bachelor's of Science, so that made it easier for me. My Bachelor's of Arts degree was in Russian language and literature, and my Bachelor's of Science degree was in applied mathematics. So I could do both things, and it was kind of challenging for me to ultimately decide on a career. I mean, I could have been working for the United Nations maybe as a translator because I studied so many different languages. But ultimately, I got married and I decided to work. Okay, and I think that was really, really important, having that kind of industrial experience, especially as a professor. So I worked for 2 high-tech consulting companies in Newport, Rhode Island, absolutely beautiful location on the ocean and in the defense sector. And I very, very much enjoyed that kind of work because it was the latest technology, the latest computers. And initially I did programming in assembly language, working on submarines. Okay, so making sure that the U.S. submariners could avoid the enemy, how to determine the optimal route. So there was always kind of a network theme or a transportation theme. And then later, I was a little too efficient in my project. So my first employer would say, Anna, that's a 3-year project. You finished it in 3 months. What do we do with you then? So I'm like, give me another project. I really like what I'm doing. So ultimately, I went to another high-tech company, but it was still, we were doing work for the Naval Underwater Systems Center. And then it was wonderful because I got to work with some PhDs, and I actually did some modeling work, which, I absolutely loved operations research and network modeling from the get-go. The first time I was actually exposed as an undergraduate student at Brown University. And I recall very fondly my first conference presentation. I was the only female, and it was at the Naval Postgraduate School in beautiful Monterey, California. And I think the admirals never forgot me when I gave my presentation. I kind of really stood out. And would you believe, fascinatingly, the last conference I was at, face-to-face, was in Monterey. That was the Inform's inaugural conference on security. So that was February 2020. Okay, and we saw many, many wonderful operations researchers, practitioners, scholars, actually from around the world. So I'm very glad I went to that conference.
Yeah.
But sooner or later, I realized I don't like a boss, Dr. Subramanian. Okay? I like to work on the projects that I want to work on at the pace that I want. I don't want to be, chided if I'm too efficient. So when I was going for my master's, the companies were also, they were paying for my master's, which was really good. So I would commute to Newport, run marathons, come back, and I would compete with full-time students, taking all sorts of courses, actually in engineering and in applied mathematics. And then after like 3 years, I got my master's, and I decided I want to go for a PhD full-time. Okay, so there was only one female professor at that time at Brown in the Division of Applied Mathematics, and she also had an appointment in the Division of Engineering. And her name was Stella de Firmos, Greek, obviously. And she was only the second female PhD in operations research from the United States, which I thought was fascinating. Okay, I'm still doing some research trying to identify, because Elsa Land preceded her in terms of a PhD, but to figure out, worldwide, who were the very first female pioneers in operations research in terms of their PhDs. So we had a fabulous relationship because I was her first PhD student. And we ended up publishing together a paper in operations research, mathematical programming. It was fascinating. She had young children at the time, so it was wonderful to see that. We would go to conferences together, share a room. We had so much fun, but very sadly, she passed away at age 49 of cancer. Okay, I think she was absolutely brilliant, and one of her papers was identified by the Transportation Science Journal of Informs when they celebrated their 50th anniversary as being amongst the top dozen or so most impactful papers in transportation. So that's the kind of legacy she has left. Okay, so I try and follow in her footsteps. And when you think of the footsteps, one of my PhD students was wonderful. And when she got her PhD, she presented me with my academic genealogy. So Stella de Firmos was my advisor. Her advisor was Tom Sparrow. And do you believe that our academic lineage goes back to Maxwell and Newton and Galileo? Okay, so we're really standing on shoulders of giants, as are my PhD students as well.
Yeah, fantastic.
I think that's beautiful. Really, really something.
Yeah, right. So Anna, your interest in OR started when you were doing your undergrad, or it came when you started working for that company or during the master's?
We had a visiting professor from England who taught a course on operations research that I took. And when he introduced the simplex method and also the projects that we would do, it's like, an assignment problem or, packing up your backpack and you're going hiking with your favorite foods and you have, budgetary constraints. I just absolutely fell in love with that. It's just love, and my love for OR has never stopped. I think it's the absolutely best field you can be in. It's so impactful, so fascinating, and we never run out of ideas or problems. We're the kind, there's a problem we need to solve, there might not be a methodology, so we'll go and try and invent the methodology because there's a need. That's really, really great. And then it gets picked up by other disciplines. Sometimes they forget that we're the ones that developed it, but I think there's so much creativity in our profession, and I love that.
Yes, of course you had to face many challenges when you're doing your PhD. Can you mention some of them?
When I was doing my PhD, I don't think there were as many challenges, except, there was only one female professor. You hardly ever saw it. Even as my undergrad, when it came to the math, I never had a female professor in math. So that was unusual. But I loved what I was doing. I had the industrial experience. So to me, going for a PhD and studying and doing research full time, that was an absolute pleasure. Okay.
Yeah, but really there was no internet back then.
Oh, true. And I remember Stella telling me, Anna, you have to solve this traffic network equilibrium problem. Okay, she was never into coding or software. This was a while back. So she would give me piles of pink paper, and there I'd be iterating by hand. And I was thinking, this I will never get out of here if I do it. So, and I think one of the reasons she picked me, she had a really nice National Science Foundation grant. She knew that I had coded in the industry and I had a lot of experience with software engineering. So ultimately, I started coding, and I've never stopped. I absolutely love computer programming. But indeed, we would, there'd be a secretary, though, who would type our papers, and they were amazing in those days. They really made mistakes. You try to make your paper really, really good because you didn't want to revise it. You send the mail out, you wait for the referee's reports. So it took so long. Okay, but the excitement was still there when you got the paper acceptance. I don't think that ever goes away. Okay, if that goes away, you should, do something else. But I think it's always thrilling to get that paper acceptance, and you did your best. And Stella was a fantastic mentor too. She was almost like a poet. We would read our papers out loud to make sure they sounded good too. Not only would they have to look good, but they had to sound good. I really like that. I want to leave something lasting with your work.
Yeah. And in terms of research, what did you study during your PhD?
My thesis was one of the first theses on variational inequalities and applications, and Stella had a classical paper where she identified that the traffic network equilibrium conditions actually had the structure of a variational inequality. So that enabled us to model all sorts of problems in a much more general format in terms of congested urban transportation networks, spatial price equilibrium networks, even general economic equilibrium networks. So we could formulate them rigorously, do the qualitative analysis. That was always very important. Does a solution exist? Is the solution unique? That's important in practice, also in terms of algorithm, and also how to solve. Okay, so the work had impact in many different fields, including regional science and economics. And I love that interdisciplinary aspect of that. And I continued that throughout, but there were more and more applications. And there was always that network theme in my research, and different decision makers interacting typically with critical infrastructure. So it's not just, an optimization problem, but game theory is really important to my research, and also exploiting network structure and visualizing different kinds of problems, financial networks, supply chain networks, all these different network systems. So you can see commonalities among different kind of network problems, take advantage of very efficient algorithms, and do all sorts of fascinating applications. And we never run out of applications. People will be contacting me from around the world. Anna, you should be working on sustainable fashion. Really? And then ultimately, if there's interest with students, we do that. So I think, we're never bored in our field. Sometimes I wish I had a boring day, a quiet day, like nothing happens. But it's really, really exciting.
Yeah, I agree absolutely. And what did you do after finishing your PhD?
It was interesting. I had offers from top consulting companies, from industry, and also from multiple academic institutions. My husband was still working on his PhD, which is in low temperature physics, experimentalist, absolute zero. That's not easy stuff. So ultimately, I decided in a place that would be fairly close to Providence, Rhode Island, and that's Amherst. University of Massachusetts Amherst. I never thought that I'd stay as long as I would, because I love cities, but Amherst is beautiful, and UMass has been really, really good to me and very, very supportive. So very grateful.
So you got the invitation, or you applied for the position there?
Oh, because I was, finishing up my I applied, and
Mm.
actually I got the job through the New York Times. In that time, they actually had job postings, and I was really intrigued. I liked that. I had applied to even business schools. I had gotten into Wharton, for example, Sloan, and I was thinking of getting an MBA, but ultimately I got a PhD. But that's okay because I teach in a business school now.
Yes, and I wonder how your degree on Russian literature affected your career.
Actually, I just love Russian literature, Dostoevsky, and that's one reason I wanted to pursue that. It's been very helpful because originally I was reading many publications in applied math, okay, and even algorithms in Russian, so that gave me a competitive advantage. And I love that. I have Russian friends. So we've organized several Dynamics of Disasters conferences with Professor Panos Pardalos, who I know you've interviewed, and Elias Katsirias. And sometimes we have our Russian friends coming. Okay. And I have even a Russian colleague that I speak Russian to. She's a female professor in finance at the Isenberg School, and we enjoy it. And the men can't figure out what we're saying, and we're yipping away in Russian.
Yeah. Regarding that aspect, you also know other languages, right? German, Spanish.
Yeah, yes, I like that. And it helps because I'm so into travel, at least pre-pandemic, and that'll happen again. We'll all be traveling again. I like to live in other countries. I think it enriches your experiences, your research. You have more stories to share with your students. I've been really honored. I've had 2 Fulbrights. One Fulbright, where German was almost essential, was in beautiful Innsbruck, Austria. Another Fulbright in Italy. I haven't learned that language yet, but I understand a lot of it. I have wonderful collaborators in Italy. That's something I think I've been very, very lucky to have all sorts of visiting professorships in different parts of the world.
Yeah.
To live in Austria, to live in Sweden, to even be a fellow at All Souls College at Oxford University. It's fabulous. And that's the kind of life you can have if you're an academic.
Yeah.
And if you take advantage of opportunities. Not everyone would want to do that. Some love to sleep in their own beds. I love challenges and meeting people around the world and getting different ideas because you live in a different, Sweden is so different from the US. It's fantastic.
Yeah, that's remarkable. I mean, all this experience of traveling somewhat boosts you, I think, right? It encourages you,
Yeah.
it motivates you. And meeting so many people also brings together ideas, and it can be, very helpful for developing collaborations and so on. So I think it's
Precisely.
Yeah.
And I would, when I live in different countries, my family would live with me too. So that was really interesting to see which countries really support parents and children and family life. Some maybe not so much, but it was wonderful. And we have friends around.
Talking about that, you eventually became a parent. So how did you manage, maternity and work?
I did everything in kind of the wrong order. I first became a full professor, right? Very quickly, actually. I had tenure in less than 4 years. Then I became a full professor. Then I had my child, and only then did I get a driver's license, which is kind of, funny. And I didn't pass on the first time. And I even had students like driving me around, giving me lessons. But I passed ultimately. And for someone who's done a lot of work in transportation, they would joke, "Oh, Anna can be more objective, because she doesn't drive." But so many interesting places you need to fly to. So that was fine. And growing up outside of New York, we always loved public transportation, and I still love public transportation.
I always get that joke because I'm basically very lost. I make 2 corners and I don't know where I am anymore with respect to the original spot. So people tend to make fun of me because of that. So
Funny.
So now, can you talk about your extensive work on Supernetworks?
Okay, sure. I established the Virtual Center for Supernetworks in 2001, just before 9/11, actually. I had written a book with a former PhD student of mine, who's now Professor Jun Dong, on supernetworks. And the book was actually inspired by one of my mentors, and I have the chaired professorship that he endowed, Jack Smith, who was the former CEO of General Motors. So we had been seeing, all these different network systems, and you can see how our economies and societies depend on different networks. And super networks are networks of networks. So the internet influences financial networks, influences various transportation networks, and we were interested in studying the interrelationships. So in August, actually, September, we'll be marking the 20th anniversary of the center that I established. And we continue to do work on numerous network themes. Just about all of my books have the word networks in them: financial networks, environmental networks, super networks, and then a few others, sustainable transportation networks. I just love networks. But it's important because, in operations research, we've done so much fundamental work in networks. And there are many other disciplines that have discovered networks fairly lately. Even, think the network science community. That's really, wonderful professor. He's a friend, Barabasi, 1999. Okay, a physicist. So it's important that we get, the kind of work that we do and the contributions out to the broader scientific community. And I was so greatly honored, not only becoming an Informs Fellow, a Regional Science Association International Fellow, but also a Network Science Fellow 2 years ago. So that meant a great deal to me, because that means recognition by physicists for the kind of work that we do. And I think that's terrific. OR is breaking all sorts of barriers, is creating bridges to many different disciplines, and we grow stronger by doing that. Okay, it's not for everyone. I've had to publish in, for example, physics journals to accomplish that and speak. But it's nice. I even got, invited to give a plenary talk at a physics conference in Berlin. It was wonderful.
Yeah.
So
You could practice your German there.
Right, exactly. Yeah, really. And fantastic food. I love German food. I love food everywhere.
Right. Your work also encompasses transportation, sustainability, even I think humanitarian logistics. I think it's important if you could elaborate more on this type of applications that's very useful for the society,
Yeah, thank you very much. I teach a course. I'm teaching it actually now, Humanitarian Logistics in Healthcare. It's a course I love to teach because I invite all sorts of practitioners. Now it's being done virtually. It's the type of class that students don't want to leave. It has major impact, and that's one reason that we've been organizing, these Dynamics of Disasters conferences. And I've co-edited 3 volumes actually to now, and we're organizing another such conference. I think what is so challenging intellectually is, in terms of disaster relief and humanitarian logistics, you have totally different objective functions, you have different scenarios, you have different kinds of constraints, and how to do that modeling well. Okay, so I've had several students who have focused, and my most recent PhD student is focusing on humanitarian logistics. But with the advent of the COVID pandemic, he's also pivoted to address many issues in the pandemic, which I think which is fascinating. And their game theory is extremely, extremely important, because there's been, shortages in terms of many products and supply chains. We've had many healthcare organizations, even national governments, competing for PPEs, and now even competing in terms of acquiring vaccines. So the kinds of tools that we've developed, they also advance methodology, very, very useful in those kinds of applications. And I think, many students want to do good, social good in terms of operations research, and they're drawn to those kind of applications. And I think also with the new president in the U.S., Joe Biden, sustainability is going to be extremely important in battling climate change. So we've done a lot of work on that. I even, when I wrote my Sustainable Transportation Networks book that was published, before 2000, then Vice President Al Gore sent me a beautiful typed letter congratulating me, and that hangs in my office.
That's
Isn't that
brilliant.
great?
Brilliant. Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, that's really, really gratifying. So when you have support like that, you keep on going.
Yeah.
That's important.
Yeah, just since you mentioned recognition, uh, I know you received many awards throughout your career. I mean, the first one we never forget, right? I think, according to the list I saw, it was in Sweden that you received it. Can you comment
Yeah,
about that?
thank you. That happened in 1986, only 3 years after I received my PhD. I was at a special all-month workshop in northern Sweden, in Umeå, Sweden, where the sun didn't set. Okay, a lot of Americans couldn't handle it. I was fine. I had dark curtains, and it was a wonderful workshop. And there was one of the highlights at the conference was to announce the recipient of the Kempe Prize. And he's a big philanthropist in honor of Tord Polander. And I was there, and they announced the prize, and I fainted. I was a co-winner with Jacques Thies, absolutely brilliant Belgian, who's done a lot of work in spatial economics. But the thing is, when you think of it, it was June 1986. What had happened shortly before? Chernobyl. See, there's the Ukrainian thing.
Correct.
The biggest technological nuclear disasters that the world has ever faced. And there was radiation everywhere, and even in Sweden. And I was there like a month after, but I'm still here. And then in October, in honor of our award, it was lovely. There was a special banquet in honor of us, and even a dance. And I was supposed to appear in a beautiful ball gown. Okay, I live in Amherst, Massachusetts. Where do you buy a ball gown? But luckily, I found a lovely seamstress. So we traveled with my husband, and it was very, very special.
Great.
Very, very special.
Yeah, and
so that was one of my favorites, I think, memories.
Yeah, and what about the other awards? There are so many of them. Can you comment?
Okay,
on some
thank you.
of them?
I've been recognized for a lot of my research, and it's very, very gratifying. And it also provides you with a big boost and support, when you get recognized when you don't expect it. I think those are the most special awards. I've been recognized also for my work mentoring students with the WORMS Award, the Women in Operations Research and Management Science, also Informs Mentorship Award. I've also gotten all sorts of major research prizes from my university, nationally and internationally. Internationally, I was honored by the Society of Global Optimization, most recent recipient of their Constantin Caratheodory Prize, which was given in beautiful Metz, France, the first female recipient, which is a great honor. And I'm the 2020 recipient of the Harold Larnder Prize, and I'll be giving the plenary talk virtually in June. And I'm only second female recipient of that prize in its 35-year history. And the first one was Elsa Land.
Wow.
So, isn't that fantastic?
Fantastic.
Really, really honor. And there's a nice Canada theme there too, which I think so. I'm really, really honored by all the recognitions. And it wouldn't be possible without my fantastic doctoral students and many, many collaborators, and they're a joy to work with. Mm-hmm. And I think that's also a characteristic of our wonderful operations research community. We're so good at collaborating. Yeah. And supporting each other too, and that's really, really important. I think, nominate students for awards, nominate your friends for awards, write those supporting letters. It's, you get a lot of joy when my letters, help and work and others get recognized, because there are a lot of good people in our field that deserve recognition. They're doing really, really solid, excellent work.
I noticed that you've done a lot of work on the Braess paradox. You even translated the original paper that was written in German, right? So
yes, that's really interesting. And that even goes back to my dissertation, because a big part of it was to try and illuminate paradoxical phenomena dating to the classic work of Professor Dietrich Braess. He publishes a paper in 1968. And interestingly enough, in about 2005, he contacted me. He said, Anna, the computer scientists are obsessed by the Braess paradox, which I was well aware of. And we have to translate the article from German to English. So it's good that I had years of German. And also at that time, I had a wonderful doctoral student who's now a professor at the Vienna University of Economics and Business. Okay, in Vienna, Austria. She also was fluent in German, Tina Wackelbinger. So we did the translation from German to English, and it was published in the Informs Journal of Transportation Science. And also I wrote a preface with Professor David Boyce, kind of describing how Dietrich Braess actually got the idea. Okay, which I think is really, really interesting. So when the paper got published and the preface, we actually invited Professor Braess to come and visit us. And we were the first people in North America to invite him. I mean, it was amazing. Okay. So my group hosted him, the students. I had a wonderful time driving him to beer halls, showing him the sights. It was March. It wasn't the nicest time of year, obviously, in Western Massachusetts, but he had a great time and a real inspiration. And we continued to communicate. And Braess paradox is something, you add a link and you make everyone worse off in terms of, travel time in a transportation network. Is just something which really resonates with many, many people. And it's gotten a lot of coverage even in the press. And it's going to be interesting with Biden's kind of push for investing in transportation infrastructure in the US. You have to capture the behavior of the users because you don't want to make bad decisions. You don't want to be adding, internet links, the travel time increases, adding roads, and everyone is worse off. So I think our work is going to be very, very relevant. And we've done all sorts of discoveries, even with my husband, electronic circuits. You can physically build something which electrical engineers say, how can this possibly happen? But we've created Braess paradox, even using electronic, physically showing that it can happen.
And there was an application in Broadway, correct?
Right, exactly. I had the pleasure of speaking at the World Science Festival, which was a marvelous event in New York City because they decided, former Mayor Bloomberg, to close Broadway from 42nd to 47th Street and to create a pedestrian plaza. Okay, and actually travel time didn't get much worse. We didn't actually improve. You do the taxis and so on. And it's been kept up, which is interesting because the next mayor wanted to get rid of it. And people are saying, no, we love it. You got to keep it. And you can see from the topology, how it would make sense to actually move.
It's fascinating when you see it working in practice, right?
Right, exactly. And people notice and people respond. And it was a wonderful event, that we had on traffic as part of the World Science Fair. I don't know how many hundreds of people were in the audience at the NYU Kimmel Center. And they stayed. They didn't want to leave. They wanted to discuss more. It was and it's actually available online. There's a video of the whole panel that I share with my students because it's fun. And I also was part of a PBS production, America Revealed. I was filmed on Broadway with Yul Kwon, and that's also available online, which is great.
Fantastic.
Really exciting. Thank
you. You're mentioning your students every now and then, so let's talk about them. How is your relationship with your PhD students?
I've written, I don't know how many of the books with my former PhD students. Very, very proud. The Supernetworks book, Environmental Networks book, Financial Networks book was Dr. Stavros Siokos, who's a super successful financier based in London. I did the Projected Dynamical Systems book, which was a breakthrough in dynamical systems with Professor Ding Zhang. And I love my books. And actually, that's a big compliment I hear from colleagues around the world. Even at Imperial College, I always say, Anna, as soon as I get one of your books, the students always disappear with your books. And to me, that's a real compliment. And also the Fragile Networks book I wrote with Patrick Chung, which I think is really, really important book in 2009, identifying vulnerabilities and synergies in an uncertain world. Okay, identifying most important nodes and links in supply chain networks, in transportation networks, financial networks, and ranking them.
Yeah.
Doing all sorts of robustness and resilience analysis. And we developed a performance measure that is being used worldwide in many, many countries to identify even where to invest in terms of network infrastructure, how to determine even better maritime routes in Indonesia, which I think is super, super cool.
Yeah, that's remarkable. I mean, you have your work used all over the world,
Yes.
and that must give a real nice, feel, and it must be really fantastic.
Yeah, and it's amazing when it gets implemented so quickly. I think that's, because one thing, as academics, we have to be extremely patient, right?
Yeah.
We have to wait for those referees report, but sometimes if you do the right paper, you get the news out, the right book out, you can really influence policy. And I think that is incredibly rewarding and gratifying. And that we've done also in the pandemic.
Yeah.
I wrote a couple of op-ed pieces, one on blood supply chains that was published on March 12th, 2020, the day after the World Health Organization declared the pandemic on March 11th. And that was used by 22 attorney generals to influence the then Secretary of Health and Human Services in the United States to kind of change some of the regulations associated with blood supply. My article was cited right on the front page, and that happened in April, that memo. It was incredible.
Yeah.
And it was instigated by the then California's Attorney General, Becerra, who got approved to be the head of Health and Human Services by Congress. And he was actually selected by President Joe Biden. So that's really exciting.
Talking about the pandemic, can you relate networks, OR, and the COVID-19 pandemic? How would you cite examples? There are obvious applications, but I would like to hear your views on this.
Yeah, I think we usually do research very intensively and intently, but I think we reached another order of magnitude, probably driven by adrenaline in the pandemic. Okay, so we pursued several different research streams in the pandemic. One I've been very heavily involved in, including integrating labor in optimization models and game theory models for supply chain networks, and seeing what happens when you have labor disrupted, which has been really big in terms of meat processing plants, migrant labor, and so on. So there are 3 papers now actually all accepted in that area, and that has gotten a lot of attention. Also have done a lot of work in terms of game theory and competing for PPEs, medical supplies, even now vaccines, and how you can have more equitable allocation. We've extended stochastic optimization to the game theory framework, and also dealing with generalized Nash equilibria in a series of papers. One actually in the New Journal, published, co-edited by Professor Lubecki and Pardalos, SN Operations Research Forum, and also International Journal of Production Economics and other kinds of journals. So that's with my doctoral student Mushtaba Solapur, and also former doctoral students. Work with Duda and Jun Dong. And I've done a lot of work on migration too, with Patrizia Daniele of the University of Catania in Italy, because that's a huge issue now in the US and Mexico and many different parts of the world, with all COVID and strife and climate change, so much suffering. You have these new migration patterns. So we studied them in terms of network models and trying to also suggest policies to kind of mitigate the problems associated with human migration. And a lot of the work, because we've done work on perishable products supply chains. I have a book with Professor Masumi, my husband, and another former doctoral student, Minyu. And so many of the supply chains that have been disrupted, globally, are perishable product supply chains, right? food because you can't get enough labor. Even the PPEs that perished. Okay, you wouldn't think they're perishable products, but they did perish in the U.S. national stockpile. So I've been extremely busy in the pandemic, being interviewed by so many journalists, New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, multiple times, because it's also relevant to the ultra cold chain, right? The Pfizer vaccine, Moderna, also cold chain. So I spent over many, many months, really hours a day, speaking to various journalists. And that's very rewarding because you educate and you inform, and then through their writings, they can really influence change. Okay.
Yeah.
And I've done, I don't know how many radio shows, even Farm Talk in North Dakota, which I totally enjoyed. Once I had to literally get out of my pajamas to be on a news show in Boston. But I really like these journalists, so I can't say no to them. And a highlight was being even on a BBC radio show.
That's brilliant.
Thank
that's a
you.
very important work in trying to not only, as you said, educate people, but also to show how OR can be very useful, especially in this situation, it's emergency situation that we're facing. And, talking about this, the amount of OR applications just keeps increasing over the years. And, talking about the paradox, I have a sense that we might be losing some ground to other, areas. What do you think can be done to make OR more popular or to change this scenario?
I think that's a really, really good point. Okay, and I know some of our top professional societies, even Informs, they've been working very, very hard on this. I think part of it is maybe a brand identity that isn't as clear. Maybe we should be doing more marketing, but I think there are a lot of initiatives now to get us more visible, our work more visible in the media. I mean, it takes a different mindset. You have to be, available, and you got to be careful sometimes what you say. But it's really, really worth it, and it pays off. I've had even Pulitzer Prize winning journalists tell me, Anna, I wish I had majored in operations and logistics. That means something, you've gotten through. You see how important. And I think now in the pandemic, it's so clear that supply chains are so important. And who are the leaders in that kind of research? Obviously, it's our community. It's not computer scientists. I'm sorry. I think what is so wonderful about our field, we have the domain knowledge too. We know the applications, whether transportation, logistics, healthcare, energy. We know the applications. And then we do the modeling behind that. We do the algorithm, the data analytics, the implementation, the prescriptive kind of analysis, for the public, for decision makers, and so on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that type of work takes time. And we're not actually exactly trained to do that. We spend our lives doing research and trying to convince reviewers that our work is relevant, but maybe we don't have the touch and how to do the proper marketing for the society.
Yeah, I think that's really good point. I know some universities tend to train some of their faculty how to speak to the media and so on. But some of us, I even said, I never had any training. You think of, just the public speaking and your passion, and you have to do it. And you just rise to the occasion and do it. I also think it's really important that our community work with legislators and major decision makers, whether corporations or, governors. So I'm on several task forces. I can't speak in detail about that, but I do work a lot behind the scenes to get things done. And you can accomplish a lot through social media too. Visibility. And I think our community is getting better. Some are extremely active on Twitter and LinkedIn. That's, again, a different mindset. But if you have something, that deserves celebrating, and I think we have a lot of that in our community, we should do it. When I was a visiting professor at the University of Gothenburg, for example, every time someone published a paper in our group, and I love writing papers, we would have cake. They have delicious cake and coffee. We need to do more than individually and to get the good news out. And I think some of our professional societies, I think, informs, and also I want to single out the UK Society, the Operations Research. They're getting very much better at that. And I think that's extremely important. Okay. And also, I think many in our community internationally are getting good sized grants because scientific agencies are seeing the importance of our work. And I think the pandemic is like a world war to us. We were so useful in our expertise. I mean, the field started in World War II, and it's happening again. I think this resurgence of demand for our contributions.
Yeah.
So I tell students, I mean, this is the best field to be in. It's really, really fantastic. You can do so much good.
We have to talk about women in STEM, of course. You were a very important person in that context. You've been a pioneer. You've been a source of inspiration to so many people, and especially young ladies. So young students in general. And you appeared in that book, 44 Women in STEM. So how was the experience? Can you tell me more about that?
Oh, that was so wonderful. I was contacted by the editor, and she's really behind the movement, Stephanie Espy. She's an African-American scientist. She was trained as a chemical engineer at MIT, which is phenomenal. And she has 2 advanced degrees. She even has an MBA. She has 2 daughters. And she decided, well, what could she possibly do to create role models? Because when we were younger, there weren't books like this. You think a book and, literature can make such a difference in your life. Kind words from teachers can really impact a person's life. And so she decided on, 4 different areas. She wanted to focus on younger girls, but even elementary school, 8, 9, and even like middle school, maybe even high school. So she identified female researchers in like mathematics and engineering. And she reached out to me and said, Anna, I love your work in networks. I've seen how visible you are. You're speaking in all these different interesting forums. Would you be interested? I will send up a team of photographers to the Isenberg School. And also I'll be interviewing you. So I did that. I think what she produced is fantastic. It's just a beautiful book, and I'm just so honored. And I know quite a few of the other women, which makes it also extra special. And know what's fascinating, Dr. Subramanian? When I have been introduced by males at some major international forums, including at the Congreso Futuro in Chile, the men will single that out. They say, wow, you've been featured in the STEM Gems book. So I even told Stephanie, you need to translate your book in Spanish, in different languages, because I think it would really, really make a difference. So they're very proud of that. But some of them have daughters. They want their daughters to, have different opportunities, not to be limited. The world, we need everyone. To contribute. Look at the major contributions in terms of the mRNA vaccines. There are a lot of women behind those ideas. So we need everyone to work together.
I had very few women students. I feel very, bad about that. And I know that is somewhat a phenomenon worldwide in OR, maybe. How can we improve these numbers?
Oh, that's really interesting. There's a group in Italy, very, very active, called Aero Young, and they've been doing a lot of writings. Some of the papers have been published in this relatively new Springer Nature journal that I mentioned before as an operations research forum, doing even, for example, reaching out to girls, and obviously boys, even at the high school level or maybe younger, to familiarize them, with operations research, more mathematics. I think what draws many to our field is actually the applications. Okay, so I think having them be more aware of the applications at a younger age is and you need the role models. I mean, I gravitated to the only female professor in the Division of Engineering and Division of Applied Math at Brown. And believe me, some of the male professors, they never forgave me. They were mad. That didn't help in my education. Actually, they're like, Anna, why didn't you work for me? Well, I thought it was really important. I wanted that. I never had a female professor in math. And it was very, very special. Very, very special.
Yeah. And what men, what men can do to help the cause of women in STEM?
Oh, I think some of them are doing it already. I think they're very supportive. They reach out as collaborators. They invite women as invited speakers. And now I think, in the Zoom era, I think females can maybe more easily be invited to give virtual talks in seminar series. I think that really is helpful because they don't have to travel. They don't have to disrupt, their teaching and family lives. It's much easier to do that. They might even be able to record their talks. So I think creating opportunities is really, really important. I've had many fantastic male advocates in my career and mentors, and I am forever, ever grateful to them. Okay, and they become friends. And that's being supportive. Okay, throughout, reaching out to females, creating maybe opportunities for, being on the editorial board, helping maybe with publication, something, co-editorships. There's a lot that can be done. Even a few nice words. I have had from some very famous professors, I framed them letters, I can mention some of them. Maybe I won't, so someone doesn't get hurt if I miss. And I frame them. That means a lot to me, to take the time, Emil, to write a nice message letter. Okay. That's very meaningful and very supportive. And I remember the first talk I gave actually at a conference. It was the Math Programming Society conference at MIT. And who came to my presentation was spatial economic networks, but Professor George Donsick, and he was a little late. So he walks in, and there were so many parallel sessions, and I almost fainted again. I almost oh my God, what is the founder of the field doing in my talk? And after the talk, said, Anna, I've been working on algorithms for this problem too, but your work is better, so continue it. So, I mean, if you get pushed down, and you will be in your career, I mean, it's not easy. You got to be resilient, but you have to think about, the good points, the high points, positive, and having, words like that from, George Donsick, that's very, very, it's fabulous.
Yeah.
I don't forget those words.
Yeah, very encouraging. I see that women, they have to take that decision when they want to be a parent and want to become a parent, and maybe even more, having more than one kid, and then have to accommodate all that extra effort with work. So what is your advice and what are your views on this matter?
Actually, many universities now, mine, for example, University of Massachusetts Amherst, they provide parental leave. So, and even if you have a husband-wife team on the faculty, both can get parental leave, in, say, subsequent semesters. So that's really, really good. When I had my daughter, she was born exactly on her due date. Within 2 weeks, I was teaching. Okay, I didn't have parental leave. That was hard. The juggling with my husband and so on, and that was really hard.
Yep.
But I managed it, and it is really rewarding. And honestly, the world will hear this now. I've convinced, I don't know how many women at major research universities, if you can, do have a child, or even more if you can manage, so you don't regret it. I think that's important. It doesn't mean that it's not right for everyone, but you don't want to have regrets later. And I think also having a family provides a very important and a wonderful balance, a lovely balance. Maybe something doesn't go so well at work or with your research, or a referee didn't say something really nice about you, your work in a paper, but to have your child smile at you, see the child growing, it's very, very special, I think.
Yeah.
Very, very special. But you have to juggle. You learn how to juggle. And just because you do things in a different order, I did things in a totally different order. I mean, full professor, then have a child, then learn how to drive. Do what works for you. Life, if you take care of yourself, and we're lucky, knock on wood, can be long. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. So do what works for you and your family. But then again, there's a lot of gratification in the field, I think, whether you're in industry, in government, or in academia. You can make a really positive impact in our field.
And talking about that, your daughter is soon getting her PhD, right?
Oh, that's so nice. Yes, she'll be defending at the end of this month, and I'm absolutely thrilled. I couldn't be prouder. She's getting a PhD in a STEM field, and we never really pushed her. But she did live with us in many different countries and traveled, 100,000 miles probably with me before she was even born in utero. So very, very proud of her and very happy.
Yeah, that definitely had an impact on her. Being exposed to so many cultures and languages, and seeing you so successful, maybe that encouraged her to keep on doing a similar type of work. Her field is geology, correct?
Right, exactly. She's a field scientist. She's a rock scientist, heart scientist. And absolutely loves what she does. And I really think part of the reason she became that, she was in what was called Dagas in Stockholm, Sweden. And at age 2, they would take them and teach them how to climb trees and rocks. I was always worried, is she going to survive after I teach? But she made it. And we've lived in the Alps too. And I had a Fulbrighter in Isenberg, Austria. I have a feeling, all these. And she's had also wonderful teachers throughout elementary school and high school and even college. And I think that makes a great difference as well. Very, very important. Yeah. So thanks, to all the essential workers out there, and thanks to all the phenomenal teachers. Okay.
And you were, of course, a very busy person, but you maybe have a little bit of time to do things outside academia. So what you were doing, like painting and, what kind of hobby
I do tons of hiking. I would say hiking, travel, reading, and a lot of writing. Painting I'll come back to. I should be, but I think I use a lot of my creativity to do the research now. Okay, write books, publish. So it's a different kind of mindset. But sooner or later, I will go back to painting, I think.
Yeah. So, you, after all these accomplishments, awards, and, very, very beautiful and long career, what still keeps you motivated to continue doing this work in such a high level?
I think seeing my students succeed, seeing them flourish is really, really important to me. Seeing the discipline do so well and grow. And I love problem solving because you never get bored. I just love problems. And sometimes it could take years. There's something, in the pandemic, we figured things out that I couldn't figure out 5 years ago. So you just work at it. And somehow, you get the light bulb. You go, oh my God, that's what it is. And it's just, I love that high, that joy of discovery. Getting that perfect theorem that works, getting the code working, getting these really novel, important applications. It's really fun.
Yeah. Do you still have the time to code?
Oh, yes. I love coding. I love creating. It's like creating a product. I really enjoy it. And I have such a library of codes that I've developed over the years, and it's really fun to expand them and tweak them.
What language do you use to code?
Oh, I use different languages. Okay. Sometimes I even use Fortran because it still works. I have such a library, and I hear a lot of physicists do as well. And Elsa Land loved Fortran too.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, it's not common at all. I mean, at this stage, you're super busy. You do a lot of stuff, but still have the time to code. That's absolutely outstanding and very inspiring.
I love, Dr. Subramanian, there's that focus of coding, and getting things right, and that concentration and the discipline. And I love that. And when it works and it's beautiful and you can do so much with it and ask so many questions, it's fun. It's really fun.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I inspired myself. I hope I keep on coding. Also, I don't have the time to do it that much, but when I have the chance, I always try to do something. But,
great.
Well, Anna, I mean, it was an absolute pleasure to have you here. I mean, it was so great to hear you telling these lovely stories of yours and to share some of your experience that you had throughout your career. Thank you so much.
Thank you for this initiative. It's just fabulous. I so appreciate it. It's so valuable. I've listened to multiple of your interviews, and honestly, I was glowing for days afterwards. Okay. So honored to be part of your series. Thank you. Thank you very, very much.
Yeah, I'm so honored for your support and, for your words. And I hope to meet you someday soon. And of course, you are welcome to visit us when it's possible here in João Pessoa. We have very nice beaches, very nice weather in general. So if you're looking to explore a different place, here is one very good option.
Thank you. I've never been to Brazil, so I'd love to.
Oh, come on.
Never been to
Yeah,
I've been to Argentina, right, Chile. Yeah, Colombia multiple times. Never to Brazil.
Yeah, I think it's about time, right? Yeah. Well,
I agree.
And once again, thank you so much. You were a super kind person. You were a superwoman. And, I could spend, hours just thanking you for all your work, not only regarding this project, but also, of course, all work you've done for OR and for inspiring so many people, so many researchers, so many young women. So I think that's truly a remarkable work you've done. And I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity to talk to you and, listen to all of this. So
my pleasure.
Ciao.
Best to everyone. Ciao, everyone. Bye-bye.